I have a complicated relationship with Miraculous Ladybug. Let me start with this. I love Miraculous Ladybug. Most of the time. I love the superhero action, the character relationships, the love square where both Ladybug and Shanwa have different dynamics together depending on if they're in their civilian or superhero identities, and a lot of the humor. But there was a shift as time went on, and the issues that were already present became more prevalent and noticeable, and new issues cropped up. I did not engage with the show from the beginning. I heard of it vaguely and learned more about it and developed a real interest in the show after season 3 had ended. I started watching it on Netflix a couple of years later, using a Tumblr post that I had found as a recommended watch order for the first season, since both the production order and the release order did not make any logical sense, and another resource that I don't remember to decide on the order for the second season. I watched the third and fourth seasons in production order, still having to jump around because Netflix and Disney Plus had them in a disjointed airing order, as well as the New York and Shanghai specials between the seasons. I also started reading fanfics and joined the fandom on Tumblr, following AUs and rewrites. I watched season 5 as it aired in the US, waiting for the next one even as some of the later episodes aired way ahead of the US airings. But ahead of the season premiere and early into the season, I heard about the season's Bible being leaked. I didn't read it myself, but I learned about what was in it through people I follow on Tumblr, and I learned what we were in for as the season went on. And it wasn't great. I still watched most of the season, but I became more and more jaded with the direction that the writing was taking, and I intentionally avoided a few episodes, including the two-part finale. I later watched the Ladybug and Shanwa movie on Netflix, which I loved, but I haven't watched the subsequent specials that tied in with the main show, nor have I watched any of the new season, even though I heard good things about it, for the most part. I was just too burned by how the big plotlines and characters were handled at the end of the first big story arc. So let me break down my thoughts on Miraculous. The good, the bad, and the Andre. Heavy spoilers ahead. With that warning out of the way, let's start by looking at each season. Season 1 was straightforward and episodic, spending time on introducing and developing the cast and the setting, as well as building up the mystery of who Hawkmoth is and what he wants. Many characters got focal episodes where we got a look at their relationships and their jobs or interests before they were turned into akumatized villains of the week. There's civilian drama and antics either tying into the superhero plot or parallel to it that Marinette and Adrien are dealing with. Hawkmoth does a monologue from his attic? We never actually find out for sure where that room is. Someone gets akumatized and goes on a rampage. Marinette and Adrien transform into their superhero forms. There's some flirty banter, the heroic duo fight. Shaw gets mind controlled half a dozen times. Ladybug conjures a random object with Lucky Charm and figures out how to use it to turn the tide, and they win the day. The civilian plot is resolved, Marinette learns a lesson, and they end on a feel-good laugh and an end card. There's only a bit of interconnectedness, and the episodes can be watched in any order for the most part. There are bits and pieces of lore scattered or teased throughout the season, and either at the end or midway through the season we get the duo's origin and learn about the Kwamis. There was also a Christmas special after the first season ended, which was a musical. The songs were fine, but I didn't find them that memorable. It was apparently supposed to have more to it, but it was cut down to a regular length episode, and it's grouped with season 2 as a 26th episode for reasons I'm not versed in the industry enough to understand. It's a sweet episode about Adrien missing his mom on the first Christmas since she disappeared and his friends being there for him. I don't have a lot else to say. Season 2 is largely more of the same, but also more lore and character and plot development. In the premiere alone, Marinette is properly introduced to Master Fu, and we learn that he is the last of the Guardians of the Miraculous, and he starts mentoring her. We the viewers learn Hawkmoth's identity as Gabriel Agreste, Adrien's father, creating a personal connection between one of the heroes and the villain. And over time, we learn about what his goals are and what it means in terms of stakes, what would happen if he were to get the Ladybug and the Black Cat Miraculouses, and why it should never be allowed to happen. We also see more of the Miraculouses, previously only learning about the Fox Miraculous in Season 1's Flopina and seeing the Turtle Kwami in the Origins two-parter, and 3 of them were given to classmates who joined the main hero's team on a part-time basis. Marinette and Fu make potions that grant the heroes special power-ups, which the writers forget to develop after the first few. Characters and their relationships develop more, including between all 4 sides of the love square, and the plot starts to become more serialized while still remaining the formula show that it had been sold to the network as. The season even started telling story arcs and tying episodes directly into each other, including Chloe's gradual redemption and development into the hero Queen Bee, which was one of the show's best character arcs. which the crew less so dropped the ball on and more so overhead pitched it backwards into an active volcano. I'll get to that later. Season 2 is Miraculous Ladybug at its best and balances the formulaic format and serialized storytelling best out of all the seasons, culminating in an epic two-parter finale with 5 miraculous-wielding heroes against Hawkmoth and an army of akumatized villains. I can only imagine how hype it must have been for the fandom as the episodes were coming out. Considering the plan was for the show to continue for at least 3 more seasons, and this wasn't the end of the Egress saga, it may have been too good. Season 3 is treated as a continuation of Season 2, and it has a similar quality. It builds on the elements that were developed in the previous season, such as recruiting and introducing more miraculous-wielding heroes to the team, and revealing more of Master Fu's past. This time with Gabriel's assistant Natalie aiding him using the Peacock Miraculous to create Centimonsters, often in tandem with akumatized villains. 2 characters who were introduced in the previous season, Luca and Kagami, become romantic rivals but are very friendly with their opposites, and the only animosity is in Marinette's jealousy of Kagami, which it goes through an arc with before realizing she was in the wrong and befriending Kagami. We get strong hints, which are confirmed on screen outright, of what happened to Adrian's mother Emily, whom we know by now that Gabriel wants to use the Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculouses to revive. There are cool episodes that explore additional concepts with using the Miraculous, such as the Kwami Swap and Reflectdoll, the introduction to unifications and Marinette using different Miraculouses from the Ladybug and Kwami Buster, and Akumatai Chat Noir and Chat Blanc. A dark and dramatic episode showing one of the main heroes being akumatized as a bad future apocalyptic scenario. But it's less fun in hindsight after the end of Season 5 and the crew's commentary, which I will elaborate on later. It still has the shock value, but on reflection, one of its problems is still there when you take the episode on its own. Because despite the theme song professing power of love always so strong, the power of love between the leads, even in a timeline where they had their identity reveal and are dating, does not save them or anyone else. The conflict between Marinette and Lila had some interesting potential, especially when she started working with Gabriel to stir up drama to fuel akumatizations. But as anyone familiar with the salt pick trend that came to be after Chameleon would know, it did not exactly land in the right ways. Plus, in a show that still keeps to a formula structure that is designed so you can watch any episode and not be confused, there was no way that the threat Lila posed to Marinette's social life would have any real impact. And it feels like Lila would be better suited as the rival to any of the other 4 main teen characters. Also, the culmination of that conflict should have been tied to more than half of an episode that had another completely different plot going on before forgetting about the character for a whole season. Perhaps, since she hates Ladybug as well as Marinette, she could have been one of the antagonists on the superhero side of the season finale. Alas. The 2-part season finale hits with a lot, breaking much of the status quo of the past 2 seasons. Ladybug makes a mistake and allows Hawkmoth to capture Master Fu and take the Miracle Box, and with help from an akumatized Chloe learns the identities of all the temp heroes. It's a cool fight as Ladybug and Chat Noir unify with another Miraculous each to fight the mind-controlled temp heroes. Master Fu is forced to sacrifice his memories and pass the role of Guardian to Ladybug to get the Miraculouses out of Hawkmoth's hands. Miera is out of commission because use of the damaged Peacock Miraculous took a toll on her health in the same way that it drained Emily, but the villains have what they need to repair the Miraculous so Hawkmoth can use it himself. And Marinette and Adrian start dating Luca and Kagami. The negatives here become more apparent over time, but while this net loss for the heroes offers big developments going forward, this finale started a pattern with the heroes ultimately losing with each season finale. In addition, Chloe's redemption arc is shut down here, with her being turned back into an antagonistic brat who now resents Ladybug. While the first part, Heart Hunter, showed Hawkmoth and Miera specifically targeting and manipulating her to turn her into their side, and Ladybug's mistake is treated as contributing to her fall, the second part, Miracle Queen, does not address this, and later episodes, plus the writer's commentary, treats Chloe as selfish and unsympathetic rather than tragic. While not an awful 2-parter, the Battle of the Miraculous still leaves a bad taste in my mouth. The New York special, United Heroes, was the first in a series of movie-scale specials which were meant to expand the world of Miraculous Ladybug, and introduce more heroes beyond Paris. But after this in Shanghai, the original slate is still on the back burner, with the plan for the London special seemingly having been replaced completely. The special opens by introducing the third power-up, which lets Ladybug and Chat Noir fly and travel through space, and that is the last and most frequent power-up to be introduced even into Season 6. After that, the plot setup happens with Marinette's class, sans Lila and Ms. Bustier, and with Principal Damocles and Ms. Mendeleev taking a trip to New York City for French-American Friendship Week, with Adrien taking part as Marinette leads the class to basically show up at Gabriel's door and demand that he let Adrien go. It's a nice scene with Marinette standing up for Adrien personally, with her friends backing her up. Some subplots are also set up, but beyond that first scene, they were almost entirely cut for the decided time slot, including one that would have been sympathetic to Chloe. They all would have been neat to see developed, but I'm particularly disappointed that the Chloe subplot was lost. The superheroes in America are a fun cast, with some being based off of more famous superheroes such as Majestia being derived from Superman and Wonder Woman, and Night Owl and Sparrow being based on Batman and Robin. And also characters with fresh personalities such as Doorman and Hot Dog Dan, as well as Uncanny Valley, Majestia's robot daughter and sidekick. And there's one villain shown and another villain alluded to. Sparrow and Uncanny Valley, aka Just Keens and Aeon Hill, are cool characters with fun interactions with the other teens, civilian mode or superhero. Although I'm neutral to Jess's arc of wanting to spread her wings and stand out from her mom, both in general and because as Season 5 insinuates in her relation to another character, girl, you're 12! Although I do like her becoming the Eagle Miraculous holder, and it does lead into her mother Barbara deciding to stop pretending to be the same person as the original Night Owl, and be her own hero. There's a really cute Adrienette scene at a rooftop party where Marinette and Adrien share a superpower hot dog that lets them fly and dance in the air. Techno Pirate is a neat villain, and he'd have real potential to be more, but the villain of the special is ultimately Hawkmoth, who akumatizes him to get his hands on the Eagle Miraculous. It's not even a partnership. After the guy's first akumatization, Hawkmoth just has him chained up in a bathtub until he's ready to use him again. There's some good drama leading up to the climax and fun action. All in all, a good movie. Miraculous World Shanghai, The Legend of Lady Dragon, takes place at some point in Season 2 or 3, and it serves as a backdoor pilot for what was meant to be a spin-off, which has at present not been picked up. Which is a shame, as the focal character, Faye, is one of my favorite characters in Miraculous. The plot traces along Marinette and Adrien visiting Shanghai, but the movie is mainly about Faye and her superhero origin, with her even telling her backstory in the cold open. The movie is also darker, and the bulk of it is more grounded than the show usually is. As for Marinette and Adrien's plot, Adrien goes with his father to Shanghai for the opening of a new store for Gabriel's fashion brand, which Gabriel times so that it lines up with a magical eclipse so he can get his hands on the powerful Prodigious. Marinette goes to Shanghai to deliver a birthday present for her great uncle Wang Cheng, who was introduced in Season 1, and to get in touch with her roots. Or that's what she lets her parents believe, because the primary reason is actually to follow Adrien to Shanghai, using money that her parents had been saving up for this occasion so they could travel to China with her, mind you. Thomas Astruc has stated when asked that this was because of the rule that Marinette has to make a mistake every episode so she and the viewers can learn a lesson, but she doesn't learn anything from this, and again, the movie isn't about her, so it's a pointless decision that turns a personal act into one of the most reprehensible things Marinette has ever done. That baffling writing choice aside, the special is still great. Marinette does get to bond with her uncle after all, and form a connection with her roots as she learns about her mother's side of the family. Then she heads out into the streets of Shanghai alone, which regardless of intentions could have been where she could learn from her mistakes, as she gets pickpocketed as soon as she's distracted. Now, Hawkmoth is the overarching villain in this special as well, but I don't really mind it as he doesn't steal the spotlight and only really takes the stage in the third act, but also doesn't make it through the climax. The villain for most of the film is a black market fence called Cash, who had murdered Faye's father and stolen the key to access the Prodigious on Gabriel's behalf, and who has coerced Faye into stealing for him, considering that it was he who killed Wu Shifu, and who is a threat to Marinette as he is responsible for Faye robbing her and then sent Faye to bring her to him so he could extort her. Faye's budding friendship with Marinette reminds her of her father's teachings and who she wants to be, so she helps her and they flee from Cash to the cave where the Prodigious is kept. Which leads to one of my favorite Gabriel scenes. He sees Marinette and Faye being accosted by Cash, and when Faye knocks Cash down, Hawkmoth akumatizes him and directs him to help get through the cave's defenses as a way to keep him from harming Marinette. Then Ladybug gets the drop on Hawkmoth and would have beaten him if there wasn't an Akuma to deal with as well. The Prodigious artifact itself is similar to the Miraculous's, but distinct in an interesting way, and Faye unlocks the ultimate transformation through character development and saving her new friend, becoming Shanghai's new hero, Lady Dragon. Now on to Season 4, which really seems to mark a shift in the direction of the show. I'll start with the beginning and the shakeups of the status quo. With the Peacock Miraculous fix, Gabriel unifies it with the Butterfly and starts calling himself Shadow Moth, so he can empower Akumas and create Sentimonsters at the same time. It doesn't really add up to much in execution, and sometimes makes it easier by only having one object for Ladybug and Sean Watt to find and break. Meanwhile, due to the stress Marinette is under as the new Guardian, which she is unable to tell anyone about, and Adrien frequently running off to fight supervillains, Marinette and Luca and Adrien and Kagami break up. Those relationships didn't really last long or amount to much. After a breakdown, Marinette reveals her identity to Alia. And then in the next episode, Ladybug starts creating magical charms that can protect someone from becoming akumatized again. These are great developments that move things in a new direction for both the heroes and the villains. Another development from the previous season's finale isn't really followed up on much though, as Ladybug still calls on most of the temp heroes whose identities were exposed to Shadow Moth, and he only exploits that knowledge in 2 episodes. Those are amazing schemes, and I love the spy vs. spy game Alia plays using her newfound permanent holder status to outsmart Shadow Moth. Ladybug also fills out the team by passing out the remaining Miraculouses to more of her friends. There's a new member of the teen cast, Zoe, Chloe's half-sister who shows up from New York. The fact that she is the presumably previously unknown product of an affair is not touched on at all. She has 2 decent focal episodes, one after the other, breaks out of her family's toxic influence and befriends the other kids, and then becomes the new B Miraculous holder. I like Zoe, but it's pretty clear that she just exists to replace Chloe as a hero, and then the writers don't really develop her much for the rest of the season. She doesn't even have a huge role in any future fights, just being brought in for team battles and using Venom. And she is not nearly as good in the role as Chloe was as Queen Bee. Chloe, meanwhile, has regressed to a joke antagonist who is treated as less sympathetic than even in early Season 1, and not taken seriously at all. So everything that had been going on with her character arc is done and abandoned now. At least she's still fun. Milan, Rose, and Julga got fun hero debut episodes, but the hero debuts for Sabrina, Nathaniel, Mark, and Ivan were all crammed into one episode right before the 2-parter finale, and they barely featured in it at all. We didn't even see their transformation sequences, nor learn all their transformation phrases. Multiple episodes in this season emphasize Marinette's pathological need for control, which is exacerbated by the increased responsibility and stakes, and her tendency to take these on by herself, but it doesn't really lead to character development to address and move beyond those flaws, and even individual episodes stop saying she made mistakes and have her learn from them. With the exception of Crocodile, which does address how she is afraid of difficult conversations, to the point where she tries to influence hurtful behavior to avoid facing Luca after the breakup, to which she does realize she was wrong and they repair their friendship. But other than that, most of the season acts like she was always right. The Celestial Guardian of the Miraculous shows up and tries to take the Miracle Box and the Miraculous back from Ladybug and Sean Watt, and he raises excellent points about Marinette and Master Fu's handling of the Miraculouses, but he's a jerk about it and he's unable to help against the Akuma he causes. So while it's nice that he learns some humility and sees the merits of Ladybug's perspective, the episode doesn't strike a middle ground and it just ignores his complaints in favor of letting Marinette continue doing things the way she is. There is also an arc with Ladybug sidelining Sean Watt more and more, withholding information from him, trusting Alia more than him, and relying on the temp heroes in battle more, much to his ever-growing frustration and dismay. Now, if this had led to growth in their bond when the cell came to a head and the duo came out of it stronger than ever, it would be one thing. But in the episode where it ostensibly did all come to a head, and Shaw briefly renounced his Miraculous as he felt he was unneeded and unwanted, the underlying issue is not acknowledged, and in fact Ladybug doesn't even realize what the issue was. At the end of the episode, Adrien comes back as Sean Watt and resumes working with Ladybug as normal, but nothing changes at all. Adrien continues to be sidelined more and more in the long run, not just by his partner, but in the writing. What seems to have been happening is that in this season, Thomas Astruc started pivoting the show toward his original vision of a more serious and dramatic superhero show, with Ladybug as a solo hero and Sean Watt as more of a side character, as opposed to the formulaic, episodic, children-oriented romantic comedy superhero show that Sebastien Thibodeau sold it as so the network would pick it up. I don't oppose wanting to follow your artistic vision, but I feel like you should stay committed to the themes
You and me against the world!
and the genre of the story that you have been telling. And they are still keeping to the formula while dealing with complex topics and conflicts that are not suited for the setup. It's just not a well executed balance. Another shift taken in this season is also with Adrian, as he is made into a Centimonster. This was a theory that parts of the fanbase adopted as Season 3 drew to a close, but there was not any basis in the first 3 seasons themselves to foreshadow this. Despite Thomas Astruc's insistence that everything is planned and the writing team totally doesn't change plans as they come up with ideas. In Season 4, this is built up by Gabriel ordering Adrian around with Adrian meekly acquiescing, while Gabriel conspicuously fiddles with the wedding ring on his finger, which was actually Emily's before Gabriel's was stolen by Adrian's cousin Felix. Most of the time, it's vague and could just as easily be an effect of Gabriel's abuse, and the show also seems to forget that he would often work around or flat out disobey his father's commands in previous episodes. Until Ephemeral, another Bad Future episode that all but confirms Adrian's new status as a Centimonster by clearly showing Gabriel twist the ring even while in Shadow Moth mode to make Adrian relinquish the Black Cat Miraculous without resistance. Now let's talk about Ephemeral. I just don't like it, for multiple reasons. Suhan confronts Ladybug after an Akuma battle where Shanhua didn't show up and she didn't know why or where he was, and he insists that she as Guardian should know Shah's identity. And he's right. But her counterpoint that if they know each other's identities, then if one of them is akumatized, they're both toast is also valid. So she offers a compromise that Suhan can know Shanhua's identity, which is actually better because Suhan can't get akumatized. But then her plan is to trick Shah into thinking they're doing a mutual reveal rather than tell him about Suhan, and then have Luca as Viperian rewind time so he can tell Suhan. Luca knows both of their identities, by the way, so I don't know what he was doing going along with that. Shanhua tells her his identity and she doesn't believe it, so he detransforms. Trying to process the revelation, Ladybug chickens out of both telling Viperian to rewind time and revealing her identity to Shah, which Shah respects, and he gives her time until she's ready. Now, the middle part of this episode I do like, as Marinette grapples with the revelation and tries to reconcile the very different personas of Adrien Agreste and Shanhua, until after some advice from Luca, she starts to see the core of his character under both starkly different portrayals. And we even see a benefit of them knowing their identities, as Ladybug can just call Adrien when she needs his help in a battle. She reveals her identity to Shah, and he's delighted that one of his best friends is also the girl he loves. But then 2 short scenes later, barely a minute, it all comes crashing down as Gabriel overhears him saying "Milady" over the phone and, in what is quite frankly a leap in logic as that is not an exclusive phrase and someone could just pick up something said between the most shipped pair in the city, immediately figures out that his son is Shanhua. The following sequence as he shows Adrien his mother's body, reveals himself as Shadow Moth, uses Adrien's Amok to force Adrien to go up as Miraculous, and then akumatizes him, followed by them attacking Marinette and taking her Miraculous, just feels rushed. And it's undone just as quickly, though not before a retconned reveal that using the wish would destroy the universe and make a new one in its place. And then Ladybug confronts Suhan again and refuses to learn Shanhua's identity and says Suhan is wrong, and Suhan just relents and none of his concerns are really resolved. The season is an interesting mixed bag. It has one of my favorite episodes in the show, Glossiator 2, and also some of my least favorite episodes, including Rocketeer and Simple Man, the latter of which exists to make fun of the show's critics in a straw man sense. And speaking of episodes where Marinette's family members get akumatized, remember that episode earlier in the season where Ladybug starts making magical charms that prevent people from being akumatized again? Shadow Moth just nuh-uhs that by creating more powerful Akumas starting in Dearest Family, and just neutralizes the whole thing and renders the development of the charms and Ladybug's continued creation and distribution of them afterward utterly pointless. The season ends with Felix, Adrien's cousin who debuted as a seemingly one-off reference to an early concept of Adrien, and as an antagonist who has a habit of impersonating Adrien, betraying Ladybug and stealing all of the Temp Heroes Miraculouses to trade to Gabriel in exchange for the Peacock, and it's framed as being the result of a mistake on Ladybug's part, but she didn't really make a mistake in selecting him for the task in that episode. When she found out that everyone in the city, including the heroes, were being made to act in a risky manner, she did everything right, and she didn't even recruit him because she thought he was Adrien, but because he was the only person she knew to not be under the Akuma's effects. The only hitch in her plan was that she didn't know that he was not Adrien, but even if failing to realize he was untrustworthy had been on her part, the rules of how her yo-yo worked were rewritten to make the episode's outcome happen. And then the lesson that seemed like it was supposed to set in at the end of the episode The lesson for the season, that Ladybug should trust Sha Noir and her allies more and be a better leader, doesn't really stick into the next season. The real core of the problem and what she should really be doing going forward aren't truly addressed. Between Marinette not grasping what was going on between her and Sha and Kuroneko, and the narrative just using Su-Han being a jerk to say he's wrong and let Ladybug continue doing her thing without reflection. Some stories and conflicts work on an episode-based level, which seems to still be where the writing keeps us focused, as the problems of the day are still written to be resolved with a nice little bow on top at the end of the episodes, but the season-wide plots and conflicts fail to hit the landing and let the lessons carry through. Season 5 is where the show fell off hard. It started strong with Ladybug and Sha Noir fighting the newly empowered and christened Monarch at basically God mode, with them barely handling themselves as he takes full advantage of having 16 Miraculouses in his possession, battling him through past events in the show alongside Bunnix. And then the writers remembered that it's the season premiere instead of episode 22 of a reasonably paced season, and the momentum dies so hard Paris goes without an Akuma battle for several weeks. The next 2 episodes are a bit out of order, intentionally, with the second episode dealing with the fallout of the last few episodes as if it were a serialized show, and later, after a time skip, showing both that Tomoe Tsurugi is working with Gabriel and that Monarch is somehow able to let Akumatized villains use Miraculouses without the Akumas having them on their person, defying the expectation that the previous episode built up, that each episode named after the concepts associated with each Miraculous would involve Ladybug and Sha Noir recovering the relevant Miraculous. The next episode is set after the beginning of episode 2, showing another fight between the heroic duo and Monarch as Ladybug springs an elaborate trap on Monarch that she set up in the event that the Miraculouses under her guardianship were ever stolen, which goes off perfectly until Ladybug falls into Bonvillain's stupidity in explaining how she did it while he still has all of those Miraculouses equipped, and he takes the Cataclysm so he can escape. So while Gabriel is at his most powerful, his days are numbered and fighting Ladybug and Sha Noir himself isn't working. So the plot goes back to being episodic, but arcs actually get moving along to an extent, and the status quo shifts. I guess since this was originally anticipated to be the final season before the show was renewed, the writers had to get a move on. And the first half of the season does some neat things, even if they could have been better executed. Nino forms a resistance among the students to stand against Monarch. The love score reverses with Ladybug pursuing Sha Noir and Adrien finally realizing that he's in love with Marinette. Natalie turns against Gabriel after realizing how twisted and obsessive he's gotten with defeating Ladybug and Sha Noir over healing Emily and her, although she doesn't do much aside from letting herself be akumatized so she can try to defeat the heroes and hijack the wish from him, and later use the half of Adrien's mug that she has to override at least some of Gabriel's attempts to control Adrien with the half that he possesses, because there are 20 episodes to fill and it would be over too fast if she just flipped on him to the heroes or the cops. And the Quagatama that Tiki gave Marinette back in early season 2 is given a purpose as it lets the holder communicate with memory ghosts of past holders of the same Miraculous, and Adrien gets one too. The reversed love square arc concludes with a date between Marinette and Sha Noir and them sharing a kiss, although Sha maturely calls it off as he doesn't want to risk taking advantage of a fan who doesn't know his identity. Also, he finds out that Marinette was in love with the civilian identity from Andre the Ice Cream Man of all people, who then becomes one of the most hated characters in the show by being a toxic shipper of teenagers, mind you, and getting akumatized again over it. The mid-season two-parter, Kwame's Choice, is kind of an underwhelming event. Tiki and Plagg talk Marinette and Adrien into letting them take the Miraculouses away and pick new holders, which they can apparently do, I guess, so that the two can be together. And they do get together, though while Marinette does not overcome any of the anxieties that have been holding her back for 4.5 seasons, Adrien leads her through it and they become a couple. Meanwhile, Tiki and Plagg pick Alia and Zoe as their new holders. They have a brief tenure, but it's a fun fight scene. Now, Monarch has been using alliance rings that he and Tomoe marketed and sold throughout Paris in order to electronically transfer the captive Kwamis to his Akumas to let them use miraculous powers, and when someone like Kuki wears 5, for no reason that I can comprehend, he is given multiple miraculous powers on top of his Akuma powers. He also uses the rings to track their wearers' movements and have his AI match them to the Ladybug and Sha Noir's activities to try to figure out their identities, which Marinette avoided after realizing the potential security risk when she accidentally took her friend's ring while heroing up, and Adrien avoids by just not winning a ring that has him or Lila as an AI assistant avatar. Vidalia and Zoe do wear these rings, so Gabriel figures out that they have the Miraculouses now, and so he akumatizes Zoe while they're all at school to get them alone so he can steal the Miraculouses. Fortunately, this game over scenario is averted as the Kwamis fight back and prevent him from unifying with Plague, and the Resistance take him on and retrieve the two Miraculouses and force him to retreat. With the replacements compromised, Marinette and Adrien return to their heroic identities, which I guess won't be a problem for their love lives. Now here's what I mean by it being underwhelming. Previous two-parters have been major events or big battles, like the origin story, the Queen's battle focusing on Chloe's character development, and the season finales. What happened here? Marinette and Adrien started dating, which is a big deal, absolutely, but the way it happens isn't really done in a way that is significant enough for a two-parter, you know? They give up their Miraculouses, but they get them back not even a day later. We only see them being civilians caught in an Akuma attack for like a minute, and they don't grapple with the weight of their decision. Monarch gets the Miraculouses he'd been gunning for the whole show, but then he isn't able to make any use of either of them. I can't confirm this, but I've seen speculation in the fanbase that Kwami's choice was meant to have Marinette and Adrien reveal their identities to each other, on top of beginning to date, and that these and subsequent episodes were rewritten to excise that part when the show was renewed past the 5th season. And I can buy things being rewritten, especially in Deflagration, as I am convinced that Soul Destroyer was supposed to be a Zoe Akuma. But yeah, if there was an identity reveal, which has been more hotly anticipated than a relationship upgrade, that would have been a big enough event to necessitate a two-part event. As it is, Kwami's choice is a jumble of plot lines that aren't given enough weight and attention to justify the scale of the event. Oh, also, the whole 5 seasons were all in one single school year? Like, no? Adrianette as a couple is cute in the rest of the season, the sort of lovable gooperiness the fans have been looking forward to since season 1. Though we don't get as much on the Lady Noir side of the dynamic anymore, and unfortunately it is somewhat bogged down by the subplots that are attached to it. For instance, Marinette struggling to tell Adrien that she loves him and freaking out to herself over it is fine, I guess, on its own, but I just could not with the I love Moo bit in perfection. Then at the end of the episode, when she asked herself why she was like that, I groaned because I knew what was coming thanks to the Bible leaks ahead of the season, and I was exasperated that they were making an arc about it. Then starting in Protection, Gabriel starts trying to interfere with and break up the couple because he had an arrangement with Tomoe that Adrien would get together with Kagami. A few things about that. First, this is a little late to create a direct conflict between Marinette and Gabriel that is separate from Ladybug and Hawkmoth, and out of all the drama setup points is a sudden he doesn't want her to date her boyfriend. Which, he had been an obstacle to Adrianette in the past, but it was more so him interfering with Adrien having any kind of a social life, and one instance of him more specifically trying to akumatize Marinette. He otherwise liked Marinette in general prior to this season. Also, while Gabriel and Tomoe were clearly supporting a connection between their kids as they themselves were friends and formed a business partnership in Season 3, there wasn't really anything to even foreshadow an arranged marriage plot, especially with Adrien and Kagami claiming to be going behind their parents' backs to spend time together. Forget them never knowing that the two had broken up, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't realize they dated in the first place. Plus, this is a conflict that could be resolved by Kagami dating both of them, but the writing team that keeps Jewel Rose and Mark Nate as subtextual as possible to satisfy censors in other countries doesn't have the balls for polyamory. There is a neat scene where they finally do clash over Gabriel insisting he knows what's best for Adrien, and using her passion and his profession for fashion to showcase their viewpoints. Although I think that should have organically developed from everything else rather than just from him trying to intimidate Marinette into no longer going out with Adrien. Gabriel also interferes by controlling Adrien with his amok to try and prevent him from spending time with and kissing Marinette, using Alliance deepfakes to try and make people think Adrien and Kagami were dating or something, and forcing him to leave Paris late in the season. Felix finally returns after avoiding getting tracked down and interrogated by the heroes early in the season, and has a rushed genocidal villain to fully redeemed sad boy arc, and he hijacks all involvement on the protagonist's side in making progress in the Egress arc, despite appearing in less than 10 episodes in the back half of the series up to the finale, and being a jackwad villain for half of them. And he becomes Kagami's rebound/pair the Spirit's boyfriend because they're both Sentimonsters. Oh yeah, that's a thing for them too. Felix was theorized as such after his debut and hinted at throughout his appearances in Season 4, but Kagami's status, like Adrian's, is a retcon that started to be hinted at in mid-Season 5, and there was nothing that could reasonably be construed as foreshadowing in previous seasons. And all it really contributes is to provide a morally smoochable Sentimonster for Felix to pair up with to sell his redemption. I'll go further into his deal later, but on the topic of nasty, abused, rich blonde teens and redemption arcs, if you've watched the season, seen my Tumblr, or been paying attention at all, you know what this segue is going to be, and that's Chloe. The previous season reduced her to a joke antagonist without her positive qualities, and this season turned that up to 11. And took time and episodes away from the other plot lines to turn into Chloe Salt episodes, trying to make her as unlikable as possible, and also tried to take away any competence and coolness from her antagonistic qualities, to the point of making her flat out illiterate. I talked about Deflagration possibly being rewritten to leave out an identity reveal between the main duo, but there was also the leaked season Bible indicating that Zoe would be the Akuma for the episode, turning into a variant of Soul Crusher while she had the Black Cat Miraculous. Instead, in the episode that aired, the Akuma name and form went to Chloe, akumatized for petty reasons and ultimately more of a side plot in the episode. And speaking of stuff I saw coming from the Bible leak, derision. Oh, derision my beloved. This is one of my most hated episodes, and I actually refused and still refuse to watch it, and many other fans of the show hate it as well. It's supposed to show that Chloe is truly irredeemably evil because a prank she pulled before the show even started was somehow responsible for all of Marinette's character flaws, including her stalking Adrian and her having trouble talking to him, because of some super cruel and traumatizing prank she pulled on her with Kim as a pawn. But really, Chloe gets off easiest because, we know she was a bully, so it doesn't really say anything new or worth talking about now, only showing us more of what we already knew she did back then, and it shows her being an actual competent foe unlike the rest of the season, although it still contradicts her past even antagonistic characterization. Meanwhile, the portrayal and perception of others suffers. Marinette isn't culpable or responsible for any of her faults, and the blame is passed on to Chloe, and it takes character traits that were played for kids' rom-com humor and asks us to treat it seriously as a trauma response. Except not only does it contradict prior characterization, notably in Origins when even before getting her confidence boost, Marinette was more resigned to putting up with, but really not at all afraid of Chloe, as well as how she didn't have the same issue of talking to a crush with Luca and Chanhua, and it makes her look hypocritical in how she behaved toward other girls who were interested in Adrian, particularly Kagami and Anna Maestro. Meanwhile, Kim, who had transitioned from a kinda mean and annoying jock to a lovable himbo, has an insufferable, it's just a prank bro, mindset in the present. And Adrian jumps right to trying to cataclysm Kim after the latter is akumatized, in anger over a mean but otherwise not physically harmful practical joke his friend of a year had done a year ago when he finds out about it. This episode disgusts me, and it's not even the only episode this season I skipped. Then there's Revelation, which was ostensibly about Lila and setting her up to be the new main villain next season, but the civilian plot was spent more on trashing on Chloe and saying that she doesn't deserve to be helped, to make up the education that she apparently didn't get at all due to having Sabrina do all of her schoolwork for her, to the point that she herself apparently never learned how to write. And a few more episodes later, due to Lila's manipulation and Gabriel and Tomoe's enabling for their own agenda, Chloe forces her way into taking over as mayor of Paris, after Ladybug and Chanhua help an Akuma run her father out of office, and outlawing the superpowered people with Tsurugi robots as police enforcers, then gets akumatized into a menacing tyrant who almost defeats Ladybug and Chanhua before the people of Paris rise up against her and take her down. And then she is banished from Paris, with her father, the former mayor, blaming all the bad things he'd done on her, and handed off to her mother, whom Asterix claims was not abusive, but in a line cut from the previous episode that Asterix was upset was removed, Andre said that Chloe deserved to be abused by her. No, it isn't ever acknowledged that the whole time she was being manipulated by other villainous figures, to the point of literally having Lila feed instructions into her ear. Why do you ask? I skipped the first of these 2 episodes and I regret not skipping the second. This is the last we see of Chloe in the season, and it may well have been how she would have ended off in the show period if it had not been renewed for additional seasons. Oh yeah, to make sure that Monarch couldn't get the Rabbit Miraculous from Bunnix again, Alex has to stay in the Time Travel Burrow for the whole season. And for some reason, the heroes and her father decide to tell not just the class, but apparently the whole city exactly that, and that she has possession of a Time Travel Miraculous. And when it later comes out that Luca knows Ladybug and Chat Noir's identities, he is forced to leave Paris as well. I guess the writers realized that they couldn't make the time travel deal make sense and didn't know what to do with that mechanic, and the 2 characters' rationality and emotional maturity would have had them resolve too many personal conflicts. Even in Season 6, they're still almost entirely out of the picture. In Alex's case, probably because everyone, including the new villain, knows the identity of the person with the time travel device. As the season winds to the grand finale, Gabriel removes Adrien from the plot, Paris, but Adrien heads back to Chat Noir to tell Marinette his identity, so Father of the Year akumatizes himself both to punish him and force him to go away again, and to test out the power he has planned for his master plot. Chat fights him but ultimately gets blasted with nightmare dust that gives him a vision of being akumatized and causing the same destruction that Chat Blanc did before he manages to defeat Night Tormentor with the class's help. While that is happening, Felix and Kagami lure Marinette away and use a Centimonster to show her a play that they put together to tell her the story of Felix and Adrien's births, that they are Centimonsters, and that Gabriel aggresses Monarch. Sort of. It's done in such a vague and abstract way without just coming out and saying the latter 2 points straight. The show still doesn't want to plainly say in the text in a way that a 6-year-old target audience can understand that these characters are Centimonsters. And because the writers are still insistent that every episode should be formatted that anyone can jump in at any episode and not be confused, and apparently none of them heard of previously on, this revelation to Marinette is completely ignored in the next episode so she can find out Monarch's identity another way. So all this interpretive dance really does is give a sob story for Felix so he can be forgiven because he was abused by his father, and keep Marinette from fighting Night Tormentor and using the miraculous cure to remove the effects of the nightmare dust. So Chat chooses to go back to where his father wanted him. Felix couldn't have at least come out to talk to Marinette in person. The whole thing could have been in an email. Felix also doesn't join the final battle after this, or appear at all until the ending scene, by the way. I skipped watching the 2-part finale, because I knew how the story ended due to the Bible leak and I hated it. Monarch akumatizes himself and flies around the world dousing everyone in nightmare dust, so that he can have everyone use the Alliance Rings to provide psychological relief or something, and then uses a deepfake to make it look like Ladybug and Chat Noir kidnapped Adrien and Kagami, and then turn almost everyone in the world into miraculized drones with the powers of the Miraculouses to hunt down the heroes. Kind of a visually blander Heroes Day, which, yeah, I get. Heroes Day was goated, and you couldn't really top that without it being the same thing but bigger. From what I heard, it wasn't really clear if there was akumatization involved in that. Gabe just turned them into faceless drones. Natalie tries to kill Gabriel to stop him, but is too weak and fails. Ladybug sneaks into the Agreste mansion to find out where Adrien is, and she watches Monarch carry Natalie into the room and de-transform into Gabriel. This is presented as news to her. Natalie warns Ladybug about what Gabriel has planned and then straight up dies. Adrien is too plagued by nightmares to join the fight, so he has Plagg bring the Cat Miraculous to Ladybug, while he spends the whole plot in a white torture room and sits out on the culmination of the arc he was supposed to be central to. Heroes from the Specials join the fight against the Miraculized, as does Bunnix, and Suhan finally made himself useful by training Luca in the way of the Guardians while in Brazil, and they join in too. Marinette unifies the Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculouses and fights Monarch as Bug Noir. The creator's commentary on the finale revealed that this was a concept that was drawn up before the show premiered, possibly before Chat Noir was made into a proper main character. I think they should have either found some other way to work it in without forcing Adrien out of involvement in his own story, or just killed their darling entirely if it couldn't really work with what the show had turned out to be. The story became something else from what the concept had been at the time of Bug Noir's conception, and grew as it went on, but the writers bent the plot around to cram this one idea in rather than organically build the final battle around what had been set up before. I'm sure this fight was cool, but I can't get past the choice to cut Chat Noir out of his own role as secondary protagonist and the significance of his connection to the main villain. So Bug Noir ultimately makes Monarch lose the Butterfly Miraculous and puts him in checkmate, then shows him a video that reminds him that Emily didn't want him to go down this path, and he realizes his error. But then she offers to help him make things right and naively lets her guard down without disarming the dying man with nothing left to lose. And he paralyzes her and takes the Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculouses and uses them to make a wish, trading his life to resurrect Natalie while asking Marinette to make sure Adrien remembers when he tried to be a good father. I'll admit, I don't think the stakes would have really been satisfying if the wish didn't ultimately happen, or at least very nearly happen, but it would have had to be part of the conflict and the heroes would have had to deal with the aftermath and set things right. But instead, that's the end of the whole thing, and the following scenes are treated as a happily ever after, as if we're supposed to forget that Season 4 established that the wish would destroy the whole universe and make a new one in its place. And in that denouement, Ladybug has told Adrien and the world that Gabriel died helping her defeat Monarch, and he is remembered and memorialized as a hero, and Adrien does not get to learn and confront the truth. I don't see how anyone could reasonably see this as a good ending, but the writers viewed Gabriel as one of the heroes of the story and inspiring Gabriel to change his intentions for the wish to be a victory for Marinette. Which, no. It was made clear since Season 2 that the wish should not be allowed to be made under any circumstances because it would be dangerous to someone or something no matter how good the intentions, and that was before the retcon that it would destroy the universe. We're just supposed to pretend that everyone we watched for 5 seasons isn't dead and replaced with copies. And Adrien being lied to about his father and the very nature of his existence was treated as a good thing as the season came to a close. Also, Ladybug failed to recover the Butterfly Miraculous, and it is once again in evil hands, those being Lila's. Considering Bunnix's debut episode in Season 3 established that the heroes would still be fighting a Butterfly Miraculous holding supervillain at least a decade into the future, I'm not sure if this was put in as a sequel hook after the renewal, or if it was going to be there anyway. And Ladybug gave the temp heroes their Miraculouses permanently, which is a positive note there. This was a bad season. It had a decent start, but it went downhill hard. It was rife with character derailment and assassination, far too much time devoted to trashing Chloe, and a horrendous ending that I would be hard-pressed to find anything positive to say about. The secondary protagonist is sidelined further and further, with his agency and his own narrative siphoned away with the dang Centikids plot, to the point he is forcibly removed from the climactic culmination of the story that he had been just as much a part of as Ladybug. I stopped watching new episodes altogether at this point, keeping apprised as the next specials in the new season aired, but not wanting to fully engage until I can be convinced that I can trust the show to treat its characters and narrative properly again. I heard good things about the Paris special. I have net neutral opinions on what I heard about the London special, which spent almost no time in London itself and has been repurposed from a planned crossover or backdoor pilot with Zagtoons' planned Double Rose spy show that is apparently in development hell. It seemed to either double down on the choice to go with the big lie after all the backlash, or take a middle-of-the-road stance on it, but it also gave Lila, or Cerise or whatever her name is, a real threatening start as the new main villain. At the time of writing this part of the script, most of Season 6 has been released, and I still don't want to watch it. Although, from what I heard, much of it, at least on an individual episode's plot level, is well written. Ultimately, they actually turned around on the big lie, and it's been definitively treated as a bad thing. But rather than just walk it back and have Adrien be told the truth in the first few episodes, instead it's become the main plot, with Marinette grappling with the guilt of keeping the secret, and Adrien struggling with the disconnect between what he knew his father to be and what everyone is saying he is. But also, Marinette is being her worst self, actively gaslighting Adrien about his father, and making decisions that put him at risk to avoid telling him or letting him find out the truth, and also being a bigger control freak than ever to her friends and team. It's all absolutely going to blow up in her face, but after the previous subplots failed to stick the landing, I can't be confident that the aftermath and resolution will be handled in a sincere and satisfying way with real consequences, but a believable shot at redemption for Marinette. There are also subplots with multiple enemy parties, but I don't really care about them all that much. But hey, people can be gay now. I've shared my thoughts on the plot up to the present. Now I'm going to talk about the major characters. Marinette is a fun, likable protagonist. She's kind, clever, quirky, clumsy, sweet, awkward, naive, and cringe, and has a lot of anxiety and a tendency to overcomplicate things. It's neat that we have an all-loving hero who is low empathy but high compassion, which lets her approach to working with others and solving problems complement Adrien, who has high empathy and high compassion. And it also lends well to the lessons of the days she has to learn for the benefit of younger viewers. There's a rule in the show's formula that Marinette has to make a mistake so that she can learn from it every episode, which often but not always has decent execution, and is also why that scene in the Shanghai special happened. And those mistakes tend to come about from her acting selfishly or impulsively, her trying to help and not quite getting what the right way to help is, or her black and white view of the world. She's the primary focus of most episodes, which tracks since she's the main character, and also Thomas Asterix inserted a fan kit that he imagined for himself and his girlfriend at the time of the series' conception, and that's all well and good. Though it does sometimes take away time and focus that could be given to other characters for the episode's plot. Her friendships and other dynamics with other characters are a high point of the show, and we watch her grow as a person and as a hero, building and learning to lead a team and becoming close friends with Kagami, whom she had for a while seen as a romantic rival. I will say that, as seasons 4 and 5 went on, while there were some episodic mistakes that she had to learn from, like in Guilt Trip and Crocodile, whether intentional or otherwise, the show treats her as able to do no wrong in the grand scheme of things. Suhan's criticisms weren't really entertained for long, and Kuroneko never actually had her face the issue of her treatment of Shanhua throughout the season. The season 3 finale went from treating Master Fu's capture and Chloe's fall to Hawkmoth's side as the result of a mistake by Marinette, to blaming Chloe for her heel turn and acting as if she was never really going to change, and Marinette later dismissed the good Chloe did as Queen Bee. She's still a great character and protagonist, but those choices negatively impacted her character growth, and derision in the season 5 finale, plus the plot that season 6 is dragging her through, did her a massive disservice. Adrien is the dramatic heart of the show. Marinette's partner and counterpart is Adrien in Shanhua. He went through a lot of iterations over the course of the show's development, going from the icy Felix to the sunny Adrien. I didn't get into the fandom until a few years in, so I didn't get attached to the PV version of Felix that the early followers loved, though I did watch the PV trailer at one point, but I like the present version of Adrien better. Even when he doesn't have feelings for Marinette, or doesn't realize he has feelings for her and sees her as just a friend, or when he doesn't understand what she's doing or trying to say, he still cares deeply about her and sees her as one of his closest friends. And he is loyal to all of his friends and empathetic toward their situations. While we root for Marinette to overcome any obstacle that gets in her way, we root for Adrien to free himself from his controlling and neglectful father who holds him back, build his social life, and decide what he wants for himself. His drama gets even more intense when it's revealed to the audience that his father is the main villain Hawkmoth, giving Shanhua a personal connection to his and Ladybug's arch-nemesis, even if he doesn't know it. He's enjoyable and charming in both identities, and he's particularly funny as Shanhua. I sometimes had issues with his doggedness in his romantic pursuits of Ladybug, but he usually hits the right balance. In the first 3 seasons, Ladybug and Shanhua were equals, although Ladybug got some more attention as the main character while he was the deuteragonist. But in seasons 4 and 5, his role and significance became gradually minimized. Part of this was due to the increased use of the temp heroes dividing up importance in the plots of each episode, but also Ladybug starts trusting him less and less with things and treating him as less than an equal. This was supposed to be an arc that is addressed throughout and resolved in season 4, but as mentioned, it didn't really stick the landing. Plus, his agency is literally stripped away as he is retconned into being a Centimonster, and he is ultimately removed from his involvement in the Aggressed arc as he is literally forced out of the country, and his cousin Felix does all of the work to move things along. Turning him into a Centimonster does nothing positive for his character development, as he spent the whole series fighting for his autonomy, only for Gabriel to suddenly get an automatic override switch and Adrien isn't permitted to even try to work around it. He can't Ella enchanted his way out of his father's control, or overcome it with the power of love or something. Adrien doesn't get to truly confront Hawkmoth the villain or Gabriel the father, nor does he find out they are one and the same or the truth about his very existence. And he is ultimately reduced to a sexy lamp for Marinette and Gabriel to fight over. Oh, and remember when I talked about Chat Blanc and how the end of season 5 spoiled enjoyment of the episode? Yeah, turns out the writers used it and Ephemeral as justification for why Adrian could not participate in the final battle. Because if Shaw and Hawkmoth found out each other's identities, then Hawkmoth would akumatize him and that would be an apocalypse scenario. But that can be easily avoided by, I don't know, not letting Gabriel find out his identity ahead of the final battle and let him set a trap to make Adrian as distraught as possible, or not giving him a remote control to his son to force him to accept his akumatization, or Adrian getting character development that would let him overcome Hawkmoth better. Take away Gabriel's control over the situation his son is in, or make Adrian able to subvert Gabriel's attempt to control. Heck, that happened with Marinette becoming more strong-willed and defiant toward Gabriel trying to pressure her between Shaw Blanc and Pretension. She's allowed to grow. Don't imply that the abuse victim is too emotionally immature or whatever to not react poorly to his father's abuse. Oh, it's only a scenario we set up based on situational circumstances, nothing we writers who keep our shows canon in Schrodinger's box can do. And then the knowledge of Shaw Blanc was somehow forced into Adrian's skull and representation to push him into removing himself from the setting ahead of the finale. Sure, Marinette's behavior in Season 4 isn't at all impacted by her trauma from Shaw Blanc, but Adrian, who never knew about it, cuts himself out of his own story because of it. But that's justification. It's not a decision based on what was implemented. If it was, it would still be bad writing. The real reason Adrian was left out of the final battle was so that they could shoehorn in Marinette being Bug Noir. Sweet Tiki, my boy deserves so much better. The love square is the core relationship of the show, with a different dynamic depending on which identities they are in when they meet. And not just in romantic terms, with Marinette's crush on Adrian and Chat Noir's crush on Ladybug, but in how their friendship and how they see each other are different between identities, and how they act toward each other is impacted by who is in what persona, and how those dynamics develop and impact the other sides of the love square. The more frequent Adrianette between students Marinette and Adrian, and Lady Noir between superheroes Ladybug and Chat Noir. And there are also Ladrian between Ladybug and Adrian, so it's both identities that are crushing on each other, and Marisha between Marinette and Chat Noir as the sides that, at first, just see the other as a friend. Marisha is actually my favorite side of the love square, as by Glossiator they have the most sincere interactions that benefited from not trying to win over or be nervous around the other. This is why Glossiator 2 is one of my favorite episodes. It's just almost a full episode of them being friends and being vulnerable and honest with each other. And Marisha got the first kiss that was neither forgotten nor in an alternate timeline that may or may not have been erased. The only other setup to have something as pure and straightforward as this was Oblivio, when they both had their memories wiped completely and they just spent the whole episode with none of their preconceptions or anxieties, and they're just interacting as the base core of who they are. That episode is another favorite of mine. Ladybug and Chat Noir always have each other's backs.
You and me against the world, m'lady!
The love square reversing in Season 5 due to Adrian seeing that Marinette understood him and that he wasn't happy with the situation, and Ladybug seeing Chat Noir stand by her and be there to support her and help her up in her lowest moment after her biggest failure was nice. I just wish it had gone on a little longer and happened sooner. Or, as mentioned previously, it ended with the love square closing on an identity reveal on top of the relationship upgrade, instead of just Marinette and Adrian getting together and the superhero side of the romance being dropped. Adrianette dating in the back half of the season was cute and sweet, but oh man, the choice in the finale to have Marinette keep the truth about Adrian's father being a supervillain and about Adrian's identity as a Santa monster from him? Why did the writers think this was a good idea? And before Season 6, it was presented as a good thing, even though it made the whole relationship toxic. It was probably going to end on that note, turning a sweet ship toxic in one fell swoop before the show's renewal. They did go back and make it clear that it's a problem when they actually got to writing Season 6, but they're dragging it out for the whole season, and even if the writers did try to salvage it, I don't know how they could and have it be reasonable. Now he is a great and complex villain. As Hawkmoth, he's cool to watch be a menacing antagonist, but fun to watch fail and be humiliated. As Gabriel, I in unequal parts want to bash his head with a 9-iron for his control and abuse over Adrian, but also sympathize with him honestly wanting to be a good father, but clumsy at best and missing his wife and wanting to bring her back to life. Seasons 2 and 3 were him at his best, in my opinion, as they showed his depth and his qualms and how far he was willing to go. Not willing to see his son hurt, but too deep in the sunk cost fallacy to truly quit after seeing the danger he was put in by Style Queen. caring about Natalie and not wanting her to suffer from using the Peacock Miraculous, and genuinely liking Marinette and admiring her talent, and taking a moment to akumatize an enemy and use that to direct him away from endangering Marinette. Plus, while he's a massive control freak, he would relent when Adrien stood his ground and pushed back, or if he recognized that something was important to him. On the day-to-day, he ping-pongs between Master Manipulator and Schemer and total smooth-brained moron, and you never know whether he's going to set a clever trap that nearly outsmarts Ladybug and Chat Noir, or akumatize a baby and forget that Reflecta makes a miraculous unretrievable. He got a turnaround in his ethics in seasons 4 and 5, but his shift is more subtle than other characters, and I guess one could argue that it's a gradual shift to being more heartless, as it's tied to the Senta Adrien retcon. Whether Adrien was a Senta monster before season 4 or not, Gabriel wasn't playing with his ring to force his son's compliance, and him losing a chance to save Emily and Natalie via time travel over his obsession with defeating the heroes shows how far he has fallen by season 5. Now, this isn't bad characterization nor a bad direction to evolve the character per se, I just prefer when he had more complexity. Though making him a total monster is a weird direction when they end off giving him a quasi once upon a time villain redemption in his final moments, and framing Gabriel as a hero who just loved his family both in and out of universe, even to the child he abused. An excuse the writers gave was apparently the Brazilian network Gloob objecting to Gabriel going to jail because it would sadden kids who have a parent in jail. I don't really have a stake in that experience, but I feel it's kind of cheap. Also funny how that shifted. Just the whole ending leaves a bad taste in my mouth. The abusive parent who terrorized Paris and beyond for the whole show gets remembered as one of the heroes of the story, and, before they change course in season 6, everyone is just supposed to remember the times he tried to be a good father. Ugh. I don't have too much to say about Alya. She's fun and enjoyable, a great best friend and only sane woman to Marinette. Her relationship with Nino is cute. She suffered a lot of wholly undeserved hate from parts of the fandom in the salt trend that spawned after the Chameleon episode for the high crime of not unquestioningly buying Marinette's claims about Lila without real proof. When Marinette has a history of acting irrationally around other girls who like Adrien, and was acting very out of pocket in that episode. I'm actually glad I wasn't in the fandom when that sort of bashing was huge. Her becoming the first new hero aside from Ladybug and Chat Noir, and later Marinette's confidant after she revealed her identity as Ladybug, were great steps for Alya's character. Yeah, I honestly don't have a ton more to say about her. Now, Nino deserves better from the writers. As Adrien's best friend and Alya's boyfriend, he had a decently sized but not too huge support role, just a little bit smaller than Alya's role through season 2. He even became the holder of the Turtle Miraculous in the field. The second or third temp hero depending on how you order the episodes. He's the first friend Adrien made aside from Chloe when he started going to school, and he's the sort of friend Adrien needs, loyal and always in his friend's corner. Heck, he was one of the few people to be akumatized solely out of concern for someone else. In my opinion, he should have been that guy for everyone. For Adrien, Marinette, Alya, Chloe, whoever else. Also, he should get to hang out with Marinette solo more, as opposed to just them being a unit, paired by couples, or paired by their same-sex best friends. However, while Alya's role grew as the show went on, Nino gained less focus. He was still there with the class and as Carapace, but his importance reduced, and his only focal episode in season 4 was the Mistaken for Cheating episode, Rocketeer. He did gain a larger role in season 5 in leading the school cast in the resistance against Monarch, but aside from a couple of fights, that didn't really amount to a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. Also, would season 1 Nino really have orchestrated a plan that put Adrien's permission to go to school with his friends at risk, like he did in Illusion? I think it would be nice if he would be trusted and shown to be trustworthy with Adrien's secret identity to parallel Alya as a treat. He should have been the replacement Black Cat in the Kwame's Choice 2-parter along with Alya, but I'm okay with Zoe being given a little bit more going for her, and I won't complain too much. Oh, my girl was done so dirty. Whole videos could be made and have been made about how she was handled and how she could have been handled. Chloe has always been a fun character, incredibly entertaining when she was just a mean girl archetype who mocked her peers and caused trouble to get her way or when she felt slighted. Then she got more depth, with her truly caring about Adrien as her childhood friend, looking up to Ladybug while she hated her rival Marinette, and feeling the pain of her mother walking out on her as a child, and belittling her constantly on the occasions when she is back in her life, all while she emulated the woman to try to earn her approval. Between that and her sniveling, permissive, neglectful, corrupt mayor of a father from whom she learned his underhanded tactics, it was easy to see why she was the way she was and to want her to heal and be better. And in seasons 2 and 3, she was undergoing a redemption arc, slow and steady as she started to act nicer and put herself on the line to help the heroes, with a major turning point in the Queen's Battle two-parter, plus the unofficial third part in Maledictator, in which, after a few rough steps, resulted in Ladybug giving her a fair shot and her joining Team Miraculous as Queen Bee. The writing of this arc is a huge part of why Season 2 is so fantastic. For much of Season 3, while she was still rough around the edges, she took charge in handling the situation of a loose Akuma before it became a crisis, and at any chance she could, she asked to be lent the Bee Miraculous so she could help out. She was even the first person to reject akumatization, although later seasons had a bunch of people doing it to the point that it became trivialized. And whether she was a hero or akumatized, she was one of the most competent characters in the show, almost consistently one of the biggest threats when she was a villain, but also the best fighter on the hero team. It looked like things would go in a positive direction. Until the Season 3 finale, when Hawkmoth put a plan in motion to make her vulnerable to be pressured, and think that Ladybug didn't care about her, so he could akumatize her into Miracle Queen. After that, rather than stumble until she climbs back up to being good again, she's completely written off from being a hero again, characterized from Season 4 on as being at least as nasty as she was at the beginning of Season 1, with none of her sympathetic qualities, and claimed by some of the writers, particularly Astruc, to have always been someone who would never change. And Astruc doubled down hard on that insistence both in the writing of the show and on Twitter. Now, I'm not on Twitter and I don't follow him on Blue Sky because I don't trust myself to not get into any arguments with him, so I've only seen some of what he said directly and I'm not going to fish for it. But he'd gone on about how evil Chloe is that some people started speculating that there's something personal behind his beef with his own fictional character. Which he denied, but would you really expect him to affirm it? He even took one of his tweets and had Marinette say it word for word in Season 5 about how Adrien wanted to see the good in Lila. None of that is reflected in what is shown on screen. What I think happened is the writers wanted different things. At least one writer favored Chloe and wanted her to be redeemed, but then the less favorable writers with more pull got their way and shut that down, and said writer wasn't able to have any influence on making Chloe sympathetic. Whatever went down, someone there wrote the best character arc in the show, and Astruc said, no we didn't. On the plus side, in Season 4, she's still fun to watch and a challenging adversary. I would have accepted Chloe falling back into being a villain, or at least tolerated it, if it was treated as a tragedy, instead of being her fault entirely and that she is pure evil. I said my piece on Zoe already, but it's so obvious that she was just made to use the Bee and fill the team roster, and no one thought on developing her or her relationship with Chloe in any way that builds on either of them. Then in Season 5, she is made completely incompetent and an idiotic minion of Lila's, to the point where it's insinuated that she never learned how to read. But of course, that's treated as entirely her fault rather than the failure of every adult in her life. There was just a whole arc of her being awful and ultimately leading to her downfall. Oh, and it wasn't just her own faults in failing through were blamed solely on her. Her father Andre blamed her for his corrupt deeds in office, sent her off to be banished from Paris and live with her mother, whom he acknowledged was abusive toward him, but Astruc argued was not abusive toward Chloe, because she still had food and shelter, and also that Chloe still had her privileges, even now since she was leaving on a private jet, however miserable she is, and kept Zoe in his custody as a pre-packaged replacement daughter for the one he failed and ruined, despite the fact that he has no legal claim to her custody. God, he sucks! In earlier seasons, really up to Zoe's debut, he came off as not a good parent or a good person, but like he did still love Chloe and want to provide the best for her, even if he was too career-focused and weak-willed to do so properly, and like he could potentially shape up if he had a wake-up call. But by now, he's a selfish, corrupt, and culpable scumbag who threw his own daughter to the curb, and in a deleted scene said that she deserved to be abused by Audrey, as soon as she became too inconvenient for him, and he pretty much kidnapped Zoe so that he would have a better child that he did not need to put any work into raising. Also, in Season 6, he's having Zoe call him Dre Dre. Gross! So let's recap here. Gabriel, a man who abused his son, terrorized Paris with supervillain attacks for a year, threatened World War III, and destroyed the universe, is just a man who loves his family and one of the heroes of the story, while Chloe, a teenage girl who was mean in middle school, is pure irredeemable evil. Let's compare their final shots. Gabriel together with his wife in the afterlife, Chloe banished to a toxic living situation and broken down and miserable. They practically have heaven and hell imagery, respectively. Is this a joke? As an antagonist in Season 3 and bits of other seasons, Lila was fine. A newcomer to the school who lies and manipulates for social clout and becomes enemies with our heroine is a fine concept. Although there are issues with the writing of that plot, as the lies are made to be bad so that a younger audience would know that she's lying, which makes most of the rest of the class look dumb for falling for them. And that led to a lot of fans indignant for Marinette's sake, making a whole genre of fanfics dedicated to trashing on whoever in the cast said fans were angry at the most. I'm sorry, Batman fans, for what the Damien Netflix dragged your fandom into. Lila was basically a worse civilian antagonist than Chloe in a period of time when Chloe was undergoing a redemption arc, and that narrative slot was being vacated, which just made her redundant when Chloe went back to being a bad guy, and Astra insisted that she was totally never meant to be truly redeemed. Even more redundant when Chloe was reduced to Lila's lackey in Season 5. Also teased in Time Tagger to become the next Hawkmoth, which her subplot in the back half of Season 5 built up. Also, she's revealed to have multiple fake identities, has a secret villain lair in the catacombs or something, and somehow conned multiple women into thinking she's their daughter. What? While she has shown herself to be a competent and dangerous new main villain, she isn't even a character anymore, just a loose collection of tropes thrown together to manufacture intrigue, but for me it had the opposite effect. Even if I were to watch the new season for other things, I have no investment in Cerise or whoever she is as a character. New information is supposed to build on what we know of a character or situation, not go LOL nope. It's more interesting to make joke theories on her true nature than to wonder what the writers are going to throw our way. Because he's a significant character too now, I guess. I hate this character, if I can really define him as such. Initially just a nod to the earlier concept of the character who became Adrian, Felix was the soap opera trope of an evil identical sibling or cousin showing up, pretending to be his relative, and causing trouble just to be a jerk. In his scant appearances in Season 4, he had an agenda, figured out that Gabriel was Shadowmoth, and tried to steal the Peacock Miraculous, with some hints that he was a Sentimonster. In the season finale, he caused all of the problems in Season 5 by impersonating his cousin again, betraying Ladybug after she trusted him with a Miraculous thinking he was Adrian, stealing the Temp Hero's Miraculouses, and trading them and the wedding ring he stole to Gabriel in exchange for the Peacock Miraculous. Then he dipped out for most of the next season before showing up as the villain of an episode, deciding to liberate Sentimonsters from their human oppressors by using a Sentimonster to wipe out everyone in Paris, save for Adrian and Kagami, but brought them all back when Adrian and Kagami didn't appreciate what he did and Ladybug made him think that he lost control of the Sentimonster. Next episode, he stalked and kidnapped Kagami to save her from Tomoe taking her amok and to form a connection with her, and she pretty quickly decided that he wasn't a bad guy, he was just awkward and didn't know how to make friends. Totally forgot about the genocide, I guess. Also, he doesn't want to make Sentimonsters anymore because he doesn't want to create something just to use and destroy. Totally fair, I suppose. Fast forward to representation, and he alongside Kagami finally decide to tell Marinette who Monarch is. Not to atone for giving him the Miraculouses in the first place, or to save Adrian, or because it's the right thing to do, or anything silly like that, but because Gabriel and Tomoe's arranged marriage ploy is getting in the way of him and Kagami being together. So yeah, the show rushed to them being deeply in love off screen, and also Kagami told him Ladybug's identity without even telling Marinette that she found out. Between getting tricked by Lila and still wanting to be her friend afterward twice, and all this with Felix, Kagami's really getting the short end of the stick this season. So he lures Marinette out and creates a Sentimonster to show her that weird play he and Kagami put together to give her that information, and then snap the Sentimonster away. And then he skipped the actual final battle and contributed nothing to actually defeating Monarch. He has the pieces of a good character and arc, but the pieces don't fit together. He's a very inconsistent character whose goals and morals change from episode to episode. He's just a walking plot device to shove the Aggress story along while Adrian is shoved out of it. I can't fathom any reason that would hold up under scrutiny why Ladybug would be happy to have him on her team. Now, I still love Miraculous Ladybug. I just don't like the direction it's been taken. I still engage in the fandom and read fanfiction, and I write some Miraculous fanfics of my own. If my future kids ever watch Miraculous, I might stop it right as Adrigamma had approached the ice cream cart in Heart Hunter, sum up what happens in the show after that point, and then help them set up an archive of our own account. I wouldn't stop them from watching further with that knowledge if they wanted, though. There is one thing where Miraculous did not leave off on a sour note, and that is Ladybug and Cat Noir the movie. Directed primarily by Jeremy Zag with no creative input from Thomas Astruc, the movie adapted the story and took some liberties in the dynamic, the lore, and the direction, and it was a musical. And it was awesome! Marinette had a clear arc starting out as a nervous, clumsy wreck, and becoming more confident in herself as Marinette and as a superhero, while Adrien started out as a loner still grieving his dead mother, but opening up more and making friends and finding love. And both help each other do that on both sides of the mask. And I love that when both the Ladybug and the Black Cat work together, they both become stronger, keeping the theme of stronger together and you and me against the world. While it's indicated that Marinette wasn't close with her classmates at the beginning, a deleted scene suggested that most of them did like her, and the reason Nino reached out to get to know Adrien was because the new kid was able to help her open up. Gabriel was more tragic here, most of his worst personal moments and traits cut out as he struggles to move on from Emily's death, like Adrien. And it's implied that he would have traded his life for Emily simply because he thinks Adrien would have been better off with her than him. And also he is totally awesome as Hawkmoth, with a kicking villain song to boot. Nuru is more than just a victim of Gabriel's control. The Butterfly Miraculous comes off as more of a purely destructive and corruptive artifact, or at least reactive as such due to his own negative emotions, but its Kwame tried to convince Gabriel to use his power in better ways. Chloe was more simple and grounded, and the movie actually provided solid reasons for her antagonism toward Marinette. Although it's funny in how she positioned herself as a romantic rival to Marinette for Adrien, she and Adrien never appeared on screen together, and Chloe never directly interacted with any of the boys, which just made her look even more fruity if possible. I don't like how Plagg was reduced to just a running fart joke. Why did they do that? Also worth noting is that, outside of a deleted scene, the movie seems to indicate more strongly that Emily is indeed dead as opposed to the show dancing around it so much that it was totally unclear if she was technically still alive and could theoretically be healed. And that better works for the theme of dealing with grief and finding a way to continue on, even if Gabriel is still giving her body the Forever Rachel treatment in his basement. The action and animation are great, and so are the songs, though I am disappointed that Christina V wasn't asked to sing as Marinette, despite her being an amazing singer, and the switch from her speaking to Lou singing was jarring. Christina did end up releasing covers of most of Marinette's songs in the movie. The film did a good job adapting and simplifying the story and fitting it into a 105-minute runtime. But what really makes it stand out is the ending. It did all the big things I wanted the show to do. Hawkmoth realized that Chat Noir was Adrien and promptly rejected both the Akuma he had put into himself and the Butterfly Miraculous. He and Adrien have an emotional confrontation, and he learns to let go of his pain and anger for his son's sake, and he is presumably arrested afterward. The good guys actually get the Butterfly Miraculous back, although the Peacock Miraculous is still there for a sequel hook. And Marinette finds out Chat Noir's identity and reveals her own to him at the school dance, the movie ending just short of a kiss. This movie succeeded where the show fell short, and Astruc can die mad about it. And a sequel is on the way, and I'm looking forward to that. So, these have been my thoughts on Miraculous Ladybug. Thanks for watching. How did you like the show? Let me know what you think about anything I said in the comments below. Be sure to hit that thumbs up if you liked the video, subscribe so you will always know when I upload, follow me on Tumblr, Twitch, and Blue Sky. I have a Discord server now if you would like to join and hang out. Have a pawsome day. I'm Riley Griffin, and I'll catch you guys later. Bug out!